Colleen Ballinger, 32, had once been a woman at the pinnacle of success in the marketing world, working at Futura Media, a major media company headquartered in the heart of the city, creative and keenly aware of emerging trends. She had earned a reputation as one of the company's top strategists. Colleen knew how to craft emotional campaigns that resonated deeply with audiences, touching their hearts and leaving a lasting impact. For her, marketing was more than just a career. It was a passion, a powerful belief in the ability to change people's perspectives on products and services. She had dedicated her youth and energy to building a name for herself in the industry, tirelessly creating and contributing to key projects. Her career wasn't just solid in the professional arena. It was bolstered by the strong relationships she'd cultivated over the years. People in the company admired her, not only for her talent, but also for her dedication and willingness to help her colleagues. Colleen wasn't the type to seek attention, yet, when needed, she could create campaigns that generated significant buzz. She knew how to connect with others emotionally, making them remember the message she wanted to convey. While there were many talented individuals at Futura Media, Colleen stood out. No one could deny the influence she had on the company's successful campaigns. She felt secure in her career, even though, on occasion, she noticed envious glances from colleagues, but she didn't let it affect her. She had faith in herself and the career she had built. Then everything changed, one autumn morning. Colleen walked into the office and found an email from the CEO waiting for her. As she read each line, her heart sank. The company had decided to restructure its staff, and someone new would be taking her position. Even more shockingly, the person replacing her was a colleague she had helped on previous projects. It was almost impossible for her to process. How could this happen? The sleepless nights, the creative ideas, the tireless work she'd invested in the company had all been discarded without any acknowledgement. The feeling of betrayal hit her like a tidal wave, sweeping away any sense of logic and trust she had left. Sitting there in the office, her mind blank, she couldn't focus on the comforting words or sympathetic glances from her colleagues. They all felt distant, as if their gestures were mere echoes in a room that no longer felt like home. How could this be happening after everything she had done? Why was she being treated this way? All the hard work, the creativity that had driven successful campaigns, now felt like a forgotten footprint, lost in the shadow of the company. With a heavy heart, Colleen stood and silently left the office, not a word spoken. Each step on the marble floor felt like it was dragging the weight of her shattered hopes. Everything she had believed in, every expectation, collapsed in an instant. How could she accept this reality? How could she endure knowing that the company she had devoted so many years to had turned its back on her? When she returned home, Colleen shut herself in her room, unwilling to face anyone. She sat in the darkness, the only sound the ticking of the clock. In that moment, she no longer felt like a successful woman. She no longer felt valuable. Instead, she felt like a failure, not because of her job, but because she had trusted too much in the people around her, those who had ultimately disappointed her. That evening, as she sat with her family, her mother's gaze lacked the usual worry or comfort. Instead, her mother sighed and said, "You don't need to worry. We'll find a way." The words hit her like a punch to the chest. She didn't feel understood or comforted by the people she thought would offer refuge. Her mother's response felt mechanical, not because her mother didn't love her, but because she simply didn't know how to help. Her father remained silent, shaking his head and turning away. Everything seemed beyond their understanding. They couldn't grasp what she was going through, the devastation of seeing everything she had built come crashing down in a single moment, All the trust she had placed in her family, in the company, now lay in shattered pieces. She felt abandoned, as if there was no one left to share this pain with. This sense of betrayal didn't just stem from her job. It reached deep into the personal relationships she had once trusted. The betrayal in her work had eroded her trust in everything. She had lived too long in a world filled with lies and self-interest, where genuine affection was secondary. The people she had helped, those she had trusted, now pushed her into the shadows without a second thought. One evening, while sitting in her room, Colleen received a message from an old friend, someone she had helped in past projects. The message was short. "I heard about what happened. Really sorry. Hope everything works out." As she read those words, anger surged within her. Everything felt like it was crumbling around her. Each person had turned their back. Each one stood from a distance, viewing her like a piece of discarded furniture, no longer of any value. And as she sat there, in the stillness of the night, holding a cold cup of coffee, a clear feeling began to rise within her. This hurt was a sign of a new beginning. She couldn't let herself be defeated by those who had betrayed her. But how could she stand up again without anyone to help? She looked at herself in the mirror, silently telling herself that this would not be the end. She would rise again, on her own feet, without needing to say a word, only showing them that she could overcome this, stronger than ever before. What had broken would never return to its original form, but she could rebuild, even if it had to be alone, and this time she would do it on her own terms. Colleen stood still, gazing out the window of her small apartment, where the soft golden light of the evening sun poured through the glass, filling the space with a warm glow. The emptiness in her heart lingered, deep and raw, like an unhealed wound. But gradually, something began to shift within her. After days of wallowing in pain, questioning whether she had the strength to rise again, Colleen started to realize that she could not keep succumbing to despair. Life wasn't about waiting for someone to rescue her. It was about standing up on her own. She began making small changes, one step at a time, after being dismissed from the company she had dedicated her youth to. The feeling of disappointment had made her see everything in a new light. Colleen understood that she needed to rebuild her life herself. And instead of wallowing in sorrow, she chose to act quietly. She didn't want to make a spectacle of her struggles, didn't want anyone to see her weakness. She simply wanted to quietly restore what had been lost. She returned to studying the marketing industry, though she was already well versed in the field, having spent years honing her craft. This time, she sought to master everything she wanted to become stronger, more capable. She enrolled in online courses, studying the latest trends and even creative methods she had never experimented with before. She read books on leadership, management, and how to adapt strategies in a constantly shifting landscape. This journey was something she had to walk alone, without the support of anyone, no sympathetic glances from family or friends. As the days passed, Colleen spent much of her time thinking about a strategy for recovery. She didn't just want to reclaim her old job. She wanted to build a new foundation for herself. She started drafting a business plan for her own marketing venture, one where she could be in complete control, but she knew that nothing would come easy. The industry was highly competitive, and she had already been cast aside. However, she was no longer the same person. She had changed, becoming more determined and decisive to attract new clients. She began rebuilding her network, reaching out to individuals she believed could help her in her journey. Although she knew many would doubt her, she understood that success could only be achieved by taking risks. During these months, Colleen also began collaborating with a few old colleagues in the industry. Together, They worked on building a detailed plan for the new venture. One of them, Sarah, had once worked with Colleen at Futura Media. Sarah helped Colleen understand more about the changes in the industry and emerging trends. Yet, this collaboration also taught Colleen invaluable lessons about trust and honesty. She realized that, despite Sarah being a good friend, there were times when she would have to stand on her own, unable to rely solely on the support of others. A week passed, but things didn't unfold as Colleen had hoped. Meetings with potential clients didn't yield immediate results. Every project encountered unexpected obstacles, and people she had previously worked with in the marketing world suddenly withdrew, no longer responding to her messages or emails. Colleen knew she was facing significant challenges, but rather than giving up, she used these setbacks as motivation. She understood that success in this industry was never handed to anyone on a silver platter. Everyone had to pay a price for what they achieved. Then, once again, she faced a shocking setback. One morning, she received a call from a potential investor who promised to help her build her project if she could prove its potential. Colleen felt as though everything was about to turn in her favor. She prepared her materials, rehearsed her pitch, and made sure everything was in place for the meeting. But after presenting her ideas, the investor rejected her, claiming, "Your project lacks appeal." The disappointment was overwhelming. It felt as though she had returned to square one, but rather than giving up, Colleen knew that this was merely another part of her long journey. She refused to stop there and continued seeking other opportunities. The people she had once helped began reappearing, offering suggestions on new approaches and strategies she could try. Each failure became a lesson, and Colleen found herself learning more with every setback. She no longer focused on seeking revenge in the traditional sense. Instead, she started rebuilding herself from the inside out. Unbeknownst to those around her, while they thought she was giving up, Colleen was silently preparing for a major breakthrough. The change in her was not just in her professional life, it extended to her entire outlook on life. Those who had pushed her out would eventually pay the price not through confrontation, but by witnessing her prove her worth. She didn't need to fight them directly. She would simply act and succeed. She would show everyone that even someone who had been pushed to the bottom could rise again, stronger than ever. This was the driving force that kept Colleen moving forward in silence, quietly rebuilding everything, and she knew that only she could decide her path. No one could stop her now. Colleen had gradually regained control over her work and life, but nothing had come easy. She realized that to restore what had been lost, it wasn't just about skill and a good strategy. It also required patience and unwavering determination. The long months of failure and disappointment seemed to be slowly replaced by a new goal, a bigger goal. Not only to prove herself, but also to show everyone who had turned their backs on her, with the lessons learned from betrayal. Colleen began rebuilding her marketing project, but this time, it wasn't just about small-scale campaigns anymore. She understood she had to aim bigger to prove that even after being knocked down, she could still rise victorious. The new project she was working on encapsulated everything she had learned during her challenging journey. She was no longer just a creative strategist. She had become a true leader. Every marketing strategy she developed was infused with skill and the ability to forge new relationships, rather than relying on familiar companies and brands. She approached clients in entirely new ways, building a strong network of partners, people she knew would recognize her true value. However, while Colleen silently worked on rebuilding her career, those who had pushed her out of Futura Media seemed unaware they were losing the most valuable asset, the biggest betrayer, the CEO of the company, who had fired her and replaced her with someone without experience, gradually began to feel the consequences of his poor decisions. Colleen's actions, her recovery, and her determination weren't just personal. It had begun to shake the very system that these people had built. One late afternoon, as Colleen continued working in her apartment, she received an unexpected call. On the other end was Sarah, the friend Colleen had turned to during her darkest times. Sarah informed her that Futura Media was facing severe financial difficulties. One of the new strategies the company had relied on to compete in the market had failed miserably, causing them to lose several important contracts. But the story didn't end there. Sarah continued to say that major clients the company had long relied on were now pulling out, no longer wanting to collaborate with Futura Media. It felt as though everything Colleen had been trying to prove over the past months was coming to fruition. Those who had wronged her were now facing failure that could destroy everything they had built. Colleen couldn't help but smile. But it wasn't a smile of triumph. She knew she didn't need to do anything grand to take revenge, because their failure was the inevitable result of their wrong decisions. The company wasn't just losing clients, it was poor leadership and hasty decisions that had led Futura Media to this dead end. In those moments, Colleen understood that sometimes standing firm and staying true to oneself was the best way to confront betrayal. Though there was no direct confrontation, she realized that her comeback had not only shaken everything, but also showed those around her that behind every failure, there is a great opportunity to rise. In the days that followed, calls from potential clients kept coming in. Former clients of Futura Media now reached out to Colleen, wanting to collaborate with her, wanting to work with her because they believed in the value she could bring. A week after the call from Sarah, as Colleen was about to sign her first contract with a major partner, she received an unexpected email from Futura Media. The email contained an invitation to collaborate again with the company, along with an apology from the CEO. They acknowledged their mistake and wanted Colleen to return. These words struck her, but not because of their remorse, rather because she knew they were merely trying to salvage the situation after their failure. They didn't truly understand her value. They were just trying to recover what they had lost. Colleen didn't need to think for long. She understood that she couldn't return to an environment where she wasn't properly valued. Her project was thriving, and everything was moving in the right direction. She couldn't let go of this opportunity again, just because of an insincere invitation. She declined the offer, but not simply because of the rejection. She had learned an important lesson sometimes. The best choice is to continue down your own path, not for revenge, but for self-respect and the value of who you are. For Colleen, this wasn't a story of revenge. It was a story of resurrection, of rediscovering herself after being pushed to the bottom. And now, those who had once betrayed her were facing consequences that could not be undone. The mistakes they had made couldn't be repaired. And Colleen, through all her effort and perseverance, had shown them that true strength comes from silence and resolve. Colleen gazed out the window, the morning light shining on her desk. Everything in the room seemed peaceful, yet inside her, a fire had been ignited long ago. After months of struggling with failure and betrayal, Colleen had begun to realize that she could no longer remain stuck in the shadows of the past. She had to step out, not just to rise, but to prove to everyone who had pushed her down that she had not only survived this trial, but would come back stronger than ever. Despite the continuous setbacks that had nearly shattered her belief in herself and everything around her, she now saw that she was gradually changing. The feelings of disappointment and discouragement seemed to have faded, replaced by an unwavering determination. The long days spent locked in her small apartment, researching strategies, improving her skills were not in vain with each failure. She had learned a valuable lesson, and this persistence was gradually paving a new path for her. The marketing project she was building was no longer just about restoring her career. It had become something much bigger. Every morning, she spent hours redesigning strategic plans, optimizing communication tools, and connecting with potential partners she had once been unable to approach. Once again, she had become a creator, but this time she was more mature, with a clearer understanding of the work and relationships necessary for success. However, there was one thing Colleen hadn't expected. Those she had once viewed as competitors in the industry began to take notice of her transformation. It started with a call from Sarah, an old friend who had helped her during her darkest times. Sarah told Colleen about a major event that Futura Media was preparing to attend, where Colleen had been invited as a guest speaker. This left Colleen feeling conflicted. The invitation wasn't just a collaboration offer. It was an acknowledgement from those who had once betrayed her. They had realized their mistake, but Colleen knew that things could never go back to how they were before. That was a truth she could not accept. Colleen decided to attend the event, but not for revenge or to make them regret their actions. She knew that her presence at the event wasn't to seek recognition from those who had cast her aside, but to prove that she was stronger than ever. Preparing for the event was not just about giving a presentation. It was an opportunity for Colleen to reaffirm herself. When the day arrived, Colleen stood on stage with her heart racing, not from nervousness, but from the strength she felt rising within. In front of the audience, Colleen didn't just talk about the successful marketing strategies she had implemented. She shared her journey, how she had faced shocks and betrayal, how she had risen after failure. She didn't want to dwell on the painful past. Instead, she wanted to deliver a message of resilience, of never letting failure define who she was. The confidence in her voice made the entire room fall silent, all eyes fixed on her. The presentation ended with a round of applause, and in that moment, Colleen knew she had done the right thing, but more importantly, she knew that not only the audience, but also she herself had realized something. Her return wasn't to prove to those who had betrayed her that she could win, but to prove to herself that she could rebuild from scratch, stronger, with her true values intact. Right after the event, calls began coming in. Potential clients, former partners, even colleagues from Futura Media reached out. One of them, the marketing director of a large company, called Colleen and proposed a partnership. It wasn't because they needed her, but because they recognized the talent and strength she could bring. Colleen felt like she was standing outside of the game this time, but not because she had been excluded. It was because she had learned how to create a new playing field for herself. Colleen didn't rush, nor did she accept all the offers immediately. She knew that after everything that had happened, she needed to carefully choose the path she would take. Each step she took now was calculated, not for revenge, but to build a more solid career. The changes within her weren't just about her successes, but also about the failures she had overcome. She didn't need acceptance from those who had turned away. She only needed respect from herself. As night fell, Colleen sat alone in her apartment, holding a warm cup of tea. The soft light in the room created a quiet space. She looked at herself in the mirror. This time, she wasn't looking at a failure, but at someone who had overcome every challenge, someone who had learned how to rise again. She smiled, not out of revenge, but because she knew she had won. And in that moment, Colleen understood that she was ready to return, not to make anyone pay, but to prove her true worth. Colleen stood on the rooftop of her apartment, looking out at the city. The sunset cast a soft golden hue over the distant buildings, creating a strangely beautiful scene. She felt the stillness of time, as if everything was finally falling back into place, though it hadn't been easy. She was back not out of a desire for revenge or to hurt anyone, but because she had found herself again. Everything now wasn't a race against others, but a battle within herself. Her project had slowly entered a phase of powerful growth. The marketing strategies she had created were starting to attract the attention of major partners, people she had once only dreamed of collaborating with. Her creativity, determination, and ability to go against market trends had yielded results beyond expectations. She no longer had to fight to prove her worth. Everything was clear now. Those who had betrayed her were now facing the consequences of their own poor decisions, even though her work was progressing. Colleen still felt a distance between herself and her old colleagues, especially those at Futura Media. The invitation to return to the company she had received earlier no longer held any meaning. She didn't feel the need to go back there to be accepted. What she needed wasn't the recognition of those who had betrayed her. She had already earned that through the results she had achieved and the new relationships she was building. Nothing was more valuable than the freedom in her work, the freedom to do what she believed in without interference. One day, while preparing for an important meeting with a major client, Colleen received a call. On the other end was the CEO of Futura Media, the man who had directly fired her and replaced her with someone new. He told her that the company was facing difficulties and wanted to invite her back to a higher position than before. This time, there were no empty words, no evasions. They admitted that their previous decisions had caused significant harm to the company, and they needed Colleen to help the company recover from the crisis. Colleen listened to the call with an unusual calmness. There was no sense of gloating or revenge, only stillness, as though everything she needed had already been achieved. "Thank you for the offer," she replied calmly, "but I have no intention of returning. Thank you for giving me an opportunity, but I have found my own path." There was silence on the other end for a moment, followed by a rushed thank you. Colleen didn't feel regret. She knew that what she needed was no longer that company, but to keep moving forward, to build her own empire from scratch. Right after the call, news began to spread throughout the industry. Futura Media had gone through a major crisis, both in reputation and finances. Their strategies were not yielding the results they had hoped for. And while Colleen hadn't done anything to directly harm the company, the wrong decisions made by those who had betrayed her were causing the company to decline sharply. Major clients that had once been their partners began to pull away, no longer trusting a company as unstable as Futura Media. Meanwhile, the project Colleen was building was thriving, attracting increasing attention from new partners. She didn't need to talk about success anymore because everything had been proven through actual results. Former clients of Futura Media, people she had once worked with, were now reaching out to her for collaboration and advice on strategy. They realized that Colleen was the one who could truly create meaningful change. The feeling of gloating never came to Colleen. In fact, she didn't feel pleased seeing Futura Media weaken. What she felt was relief, knowing that her choice had been the right one. She never needed to fight them because her dedication and abilities had already spoken for themselves. Those who had betrayed her had not only lost the trust of important partners, but were also facing the truth that they had let go of one of the company's most valuable assets, a brilliant strategist who could have helped them rise, but was callously cast aside. When new companies approached Colleen, they weren't just seeking a skilled strategist. They were looking for someone with vision, someone who had faced failure, had been betrayed, but hadn't fallen, instead rising stronger. Colleen didn't just bring innovation to marketing campaigns. She inspired those around her, helping them understand that every failure is an opportunity to learn and grow. Looking back on everything she had been through, Colleen understood that she had not only regained her career, but also regained her confidence and self-respect. Failure, betrayal, the continuous shocks, none of them could define her. She was a winner, not because she defeated anyone, but because she had learned how to stand firm through every challenge and understood that true value didn't lie in others' words or recognition, but in what she could accomplish on her own. In the end, Colleen no longer looked back at the past with hatred or anger. She only looked forward to the new opportunities ahead. She understood that not everyone could walk the same path as her, and not everyone would understand the true value of resilience. But she knew that every step she took would lead to a result no one could change. She didn't need to confront those who had betrayed her. In reality, it wasn't them paying for their actions. Her success had already spoken for itself.